I usually don't have that done. Okay, I call this meeting of the Student Services Committee of the Waukesha Board of Education to order. First up is, under general business, is verification of meeting posted.
Yes, it has.
Awesome. Next up is opportunity for public comment. Tonight, we only have one speaker. So because there are 6 speakers or less, speakers will be notified at 3 minutes, but allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board and/or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this board committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We would like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in a respectful and productive way and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, and other behavior that would detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used, and the area behind the speaker and podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, please silence your cell phones. Our one and only speaker this evening is Grace Porter. Welcome.
Hi.
Thanks for taking the time to speak to us.
All right, can I start?
You're on.
All right. Hello, my name is Grace Porter, and I'm an 8th grade student at STEM Saratoga. I'm here today to talk about the dress code policy that exists within my school, and the fact that girls are the only ones that are targeted for dress code violations. Also, the policies as a whole are not enforced consistently or equally across both genders. Some of the dress code policies in place at STEM Saratoga include clothing should not contain vulgarity or obscenity, sexual content, or the promotion of illegal products. Clothing advertising alcohol or tobacco products are not allowed. Skirts, pants, shorts, and bottoms should at least be fingertip length. And there's to be no midriff or shoulders showing with any cutoff shirts or shorter tops worn in the school setting. I have been dress coded multiple times, though not consistently, for showing a few inches of my midriff. My cleavage isn't hanging out and my bottom isn't showing, but because you can see 2 inches of my skin between the bottom of my shirt and the top of my pants, I've gotten dress coded. Is it a policy violation? Yes. However, I don't know if you've been to a shopping mall recently, but and looked at the options available but to the female population, but you will find it extremely difficult to find anything that isn't a sheer top, crop top, spaghetti strap, or cleavage-bearing top. After getting dress coded multiple times, my mom and I spent hours at Mayfair Mall searching for clothes that wouldn't violate the policy. We came up empty-handed. In fact, we took picture and video documentation and sent it to both the superintendent and the principal to show exactly the kinds of clothing options available to the female population. Even stores that are geared towards someone my mom's age have mannequins dressed in short shirts. Why do we have to focus on what girls are wearing and the idea that somehow seeing a little bit of bare skin is distracting to the male population? The dress code policy that's in place is essentially telling girls to cover up while the boys get to wear whatever they want. Schools should not be teaching females to cover up. Instead, they should be teaching boys that it is not okay to sexualize a girl based on her outfit. There are students at STEM Saratoga that wear t-shirts with the Playboy logo on it or advertising cookies, which is actually a brand of marijuana, that don't get dress coded. There are boys that wear shorts that are not fingertip length that don't get dress coded, and there are a ton of girls at STEM that wear crop tops, but only those of us labeled as defiant or troublemakers are the ones that got dress coded. I know a girl on student council that dresses just like me, if not even more provocatively, who never gets dress coded. I know another girl who is a relative of one of the teachers at STEM who also never gets dress coded. One day recently I was wearing a crop top and was asked by one of my teachers to put on a sweatshirt, even though there were 3 other girls in my class wearing a shirt similar to mine. When you don't enforce policies consistently, it seems like you are targeting certain students over others, and it isn't fair. The ACLU states that dress codes that are unevenly enforced against particular groups of students may violate laws prohibiting discrimination. Even when a dress code appears to be neutral on its face, a public school may violate a student's civil rights by targeting enforcement of its dress code against certain groups of students. Females seem to be the only targets of STEM, and even then, certain females never get dress coded, while others get dress coded constantly. Let's take a hard look at our current dress code policies and consider how biased they are against the female population. Shouldn't we be more focused on education instead of whether you can see someone's navel? Thank you.
Alrighty. Is there anyone else that would like to speak at the public comment section of the meeting? Anybody? Okay, seeing nobody. Moving on to our action items. We have one action item on the agenda this evening, and is to approve our committee minutes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? 4-0. Thank you. Moving on to our discussion information items. First up is CPR and AED presentation.
Yeah, so per Mr. Zenobia's request, I believe it was back in February, we were able to gather the information on CPR trained staff and AED locations. And Amanda Mack and 2 members of our nursing team are here tonight to go through that with you and answer any questions that you may have.
Welcome. Thanks for taking the time.
Good evening. All right, I have 2/3 of my fabulous nursing team here with me. I'll let them introduce themselves while we get this pulled up.
Hi, I'm Beth Pepler. I'm one of the district nurses.
I'm Carrie Glorios.
Welcome.
Apparently it does not want to load. All right, I will just look at it this way.
Oh, it's up. It's up.
There we go.
Go.
It's not presentation mode, that's fine. All right, so we are here to just briefly discuss medical emergency response plans, and within that, we'll be talking about CPR and AED, what we have been doing and what we will be doing, and I'm going to let my fabulous nursing team take it away.
All right, thank you. So there are currently 4 staff members that are CPR instructors, the 3 district nurses and 1 of our health room assistants. We are certified through the American Heart Association. We provide training to staff members. Currently, it's the special ed assistants and our health room assistants that are required to take the training, and then it is available for other staff members as well. We offer in-person and virtual options currently, so most of the time the staff members are taking the educational piece of it virtually, and then we're meeting with them one-on-one for a 30-minute skills checkoff. It is mandatory for special ed assistants and health room clerical assistants, and it's voluntary for administrators, secretaries, teachers, and other staff members. We currently have approximately 430 staff members who are up to date on their training. I don't know if you probably can't see that very well. 33 administrators, the 3 district nurses, 8 alt ed teachers, 20 health room assistants, the 6 occupational and physical therapists, 15 psychologists, 12 general education teachers, 24 secretaries, the 22 speech pathologists in the district, 124 special ed aides, and 136 special ed teachers.
Our trainers have been busy. It's a lot of people to train.
Hold on, let me get to the next slide here. Part of the CPR certification is also receiving first aid training, and then the use of an AED. And so we cover all 3 of those, and they end up being certified in first aid, CPR, and AED use. As far as the AEDs go, we have 1 AED in each elementary school. We have 2 AEDs at Butler and Les Paul, 1 at Horning, and then 3 AEDs in each high school, in addition to 1 AED in each high school concession stand that was provided through the Kyle Lermer Foundation, and the athletic trainers each have an AED that they have with them. We have an AED at Lindholm and 1 at the service building, and then we have access to the AEDs that are at the planetarium and the EB Shirts building. Those are provided by the city and the county, respectively. But we have access to them, and we have trained the school district staff who work there on how to use them. Our current practice in terms of responding to emergencies was to have administrators and the health room assistant respond to medical emergencies within the building. But in light of some recent events with the Damar Hamlin episode, and then the student at Arrowhead who had an incident at a game, we started to reevaluate our current practices and decided that we wanted a more standardized approach to responding to emergencies and to have a medical emergency response team in place at each school that would be trained to respond to any emergency, not just a cardiac emergency. And so we've started the process of getting those teams into place and getting everybody trained and up to speed. The other reason that that came about is because we are pursuing Heart Safe School certification through Project Adam and Children's Hospital. And they require us to have a team that knows how to respond to cardiac emergencies. And we felt like, since if somebody's unconscious, you don't know why they're unconscious, whether it's a cardiac emergency or some other medical event, we wanted to have a medical team that could respond to any emergency. Our timeline for rolling out the Project Adam initiative is we're hoping to have the 3 high schools Heart Safe certified by the end of this school year. That involves putting a plan in place, doing a lot of training, and then running a drill at least once a year to show that the team knows what to do in the event of a medical emergency. We hope to roll it out at the middle schools next school year and then the elementaries in 24-25. So by the end of 25, we hope to have the whole district Heart Safe certified through Project Adam. Go ahead. Yeah.
So a few months ago, we took the information that we had and that we used for our training and our response plan, and we elaborated on it to include all of medical emergencies. This plan will have the list of staff members that are on the team, what they're all trained and certified in, and the dates, and then
Here.
and then the roles are included. And then just a brief description of each of the medical emergencies. There's anaphylaxis, the bleeding, severe bleeding, cardiac arrest, choking, diabetic training, seizure, head injuries, overdose. And everything is now in one plan and document.
And because we love acronyms, it's called MERT, Medical Emergency Response Team. But this is obviously a skeletal plan, but each of our buildings that are undergoing this process, and kudos to our high school administrators for being willing to be early adopters in this process, do have one of these and are undergoing the training with the nurses and the drills and everything to keep us up to speed. All right. So that was a very brief overview. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? Mr. Zenobia?
Well, thank you all for coming and presenting to us. I think everybody's been more or less sensitive to what's been going on, even in the past few years, with more events. One of the, when I got to this second to last slide here, where you talked about Project Adam, you were saying that you have medical teams in place already, obviously, but you're going a step further to implement this within each medical team? Is that how you're doing it at each school?
So currently, it would just be our administrators and the health room assistant that are responding to emergencies, and we wanted a little broader team, a few more people trained that could step in and be able to respond. Project Adam just requires them to be able to respond to a cardiac emergency, but we wanted a team that would be able to respond to any emergency, regardless of what the medical situation is.
Are the teams going to be, there's going to be one per school, are they bigger in the high school level, or?
Our current, I can only speak for North because that's the one I'm working with, but our current team is 10 members. It does include all the administrators, the health room assistant, the SRO, a couple secretaries, special ed assistant, people that would be able to leave their responsibilities and respond to an emergency.
So the Project Adam part of it, were we already partnering with them, or was this due to, they already had some presence here with us? Okay.
We've been working with them for about 5 years at least, because I've been working with them for 5 years, to get this Heart Safe certification rolling. During the pandemic, everything got kind of set aside. But they are the ones, I believe, that initially provided us with some of our AEDs, and they have a grant to provide AEDs and training to schools. And so part of the agreement when we got the AEDs from them is that we would work towards this Heart Safe certification.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone else has something.
Any other questions? No? Well, thanks for the presentation. It was great. It was very informative. A little experience. I'm on a medical alert, a medical emergency response team at the district that I work at, so
Okay.
it's a lot of responsibility, but
Yes, yeah, and thank you for Carrie and Beth and Laura, our nurse that's not here tonight. It's a heavy lift to do this
Yep.
across all of our buildings.
Yep.
They're really working hard to make sure that we're in a really good spot.
for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, under discussion information items is the RBHI merit presentation.
Yeah, so John, Revere, and Janet are with us again tonight. They were with us last month to continue the discussion. Tonight, we'll go a little bit more in depth, and I'll project the presentation up on the screen. A little bit more on that screening link to care, the screener that kids would participate in. And then if this was something that the committee wished us to continue to pursue, what a possible rollout pilot would look like in Waukesha, and then when we would begin that work, and then when we would come back to you for approval to kind of get the full nod to do it. So our guests are joining us via WebEx. Is everybody on? And I see John up there. John, you're still muted? Okay. Revere and Janet, do we have you on? Not yet?
We are, and we can, at least I can hear you much better than last time, so this is wonderful.
We spent
Thank you.
yeah, we spent a considerable amount of time trying to troubleshoot that part, so hopefully it works for us this evening.
Well, it paid off, yes. Super. So, Joe, I think if it's all right, we'd be happy to start out just going through the results of the screener you took earlier today, or this evening.
Perfect.
Does that make sense to everybody? I'll share my screen now. So, earlier this evening, actually, Joe took our screener via a secure URL from our MARS, which is the Merit Assessment and Reporting System platform that we use to administer the screener and do screening, do reporting, and also follow-up analyses. And this is a view, if you can all see my screen now, of what we call the school dashboard. This is a page that helps the schools we're working with in Montana.
Hold on one second. Revere, hold on. We're waiting for your share to come up.
Okay, I'm sorry. It says I'm
So,
sharing my screen.
Just one second. We have to broadcast it up to the
Okay, very good.
our boardroom camera. Okay, you're up now.
Super. Great. Well, so as I was saying, this is our merit assessment and reporting system, the MARS system, school dashboard. And this is really what the schools use on a screening day in order to triage students and then to do appropriate follow-up with students who need help, who need care, based on either suicide risk or depression or anxiety scores. And are you guys getting a lot of echo there?
We are getting an echo, and we're going to turn the volume off on our board camera, or on our TV up here.
Okay, can you hear me still?
Yes.
Janet and John can. I don't know if the room can hear me at the moment. If somebody could give me a thumbs up, that would be helpful.
Revere, we can hear you. The problem is when we project your screen up on our boardroom camera, which is the live one, we hear the echo.
I'm not sure if anybody can hear me at the moment.
I can hear you. Are you not hearing my microphone anymore?
Now I am, yes, now I can hear you, perfect.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulty. If,
No problem, sounds great, actually. So you guys can hear me now, and I have no echo, so it's great. All right, resetting, here we go. So this is the MARS system dashboard. This is what we call the triage screen. This is what schools use on a screening day to determine which students need follow-up or additional support based on either suicide risk or depression or anxiety scores. Right now, I'm showing only the results that are into those IDs. But you can see if I remove that search term, we've got a whole host of results here. These are just test data showing different results and response sets for our school screener. There are two versions of the school screener. There's a lifetime version and what we call a senseless screening version. Lifetime is the initial sort of baseline version that students take the first time they take the screener. It covers their lifetime experiences, and then it also looks at recent suicidal thinking and behaviors. So that means 1 month for thinking, 3 months for behaviors, because they connote a higher risk of suicide than lifetime does. And then after students take this first baseline lifetime assessment, they go on and take the senseless screening assessment. Joe today has taken the lifetime assessment, and I'm just going to call his result. You can see he's using a fake ID we created, Super Joe 01, and he was negative on lifetime suicide risk and also negative on recent suicide risk, happily. He had a low depression score of 4 and a low anxiety score of 1, and I'll contextualize those in a moment. But essentially what this screen does is it allows the school to identify students who need either same-day follow-up, who are in the highest risk category for suicide, or who need follow-up within 3 days, who are at a moderate risk of suicide. We also do follow-up based on depression and anxiety scores, but that's less emergent than suicide risk for obvious reasons. Once we have the information about students who need follow-up, we then can really drill down into individualized information about each student that helps the either on-site or via telemedicine therapist intervene with the student and speak to the issues that he or she is experiencing. So let me show you what that looks like. Can you all see this report now on my screen? Great, Janet's nodding her head, so that's a good sign. These are Joe's data. from the screener he took earlier today. Essentially, what this report shows is that Joe had no or very low suicide risk over his lifetime and recently, and there's no follow-up indicated on that basis, nor is there any follow-up indicated on the basis of depression or anxiety scores. And those scores are shown at the bottom of the screen here. So we have the PHQ-A, which is for depression. It's a standardized validated assessment for depression that's been validated in the adolescent population. And similarly, we have the GAD-7, which is for generalized anxiety, also validated in the adolescent population. So Joe is looking great in this instance. And we can also see, if we scroll down here, all of the individual responses Joe has given to the questions in the screener. So all of the assessment questions for the ECSSRS suicide risk assessment are listed here, and his responses, as well as that PHQ-A depression symptom severity screening tool and the GAD-7, the GAD-7 symptom severity screening tool for anxiety. So again, very useful information for a clinician to do comprehensive follow-up with a student who needs appropriate follow-up and care. In this case, Joe wouldn't be one of those students. So that's one thing that we wanted to show you. Another thing I'd like to show you, which just came online today, is our Manage dashboard. And this is something that RBHI, our partner, uses to manage all of the schools that are undergoing school screening. These are all, again, dummy data. So there are no schools that are actually undergoing screening in here that are listed. You can see I went to Madison West High School here in Madison. That's the school that I've created as a sort of dummy admin school that we use to demonstrate the system. But what's really wonderful about this page or this dashboard is that it allows RBHI to really keep track of schools it's working with and to make it really easy for schools to do screening. So Janet is able, or her colleagues are able to generate a welcome email that's sent to the appropriate champion at the school that contains all of the necessary information to do school screening. So that's the link to the screener, the appropriate contacts at RBHI to get in touch with in case anything comes up. There's the ability for the school to add student IDs, and we do this all on the basis of student IDs, so we don't actually have any protected health information in the system, although it is HIPAA compliant and FERPA compliant. Again, just trying to protect student identity and privacy as much as possible. So really comprehensive, wonderful system that helps RBHI manage the screening process, and then as we look at the school dashboard, help schools carry out the screening on a screening day and really be efficient about it and make sure that students who need help get help. So that was really all I had to demo. Joe, is there anything else you'd like to have highlighted here or shown right now? Otherwise, we can move on to the slides that we have.
Yeah, so just so the committee knows, I did a second screener. After Revere started speaking, I started a second screener, and I completed it about 3 minutes ago. So just for your perspective in that short presentation and run through data, that gives you some idea as to how long it takes to complete the screener, should a student participate in this. And then we can move on to the slides.
That's super helpful, actually, that you did that, because it shows how responsive the system is. We had the data immediately available, and we have a different result here. So this is a result that's more concerning and that would require follow-up. This is a lifetime positive and a recent negative result. In this case, the student would receive follow-up within 3 days. We've got a depression score of 14, an anxiety score of 12. These are sub-threshold for follow-up, but they still are sort of in that gray zone where you'd want to watch that student over time and ensure that they didn't go above 15 in the next screening, because if they did, you'd want to give them follow-up on that basis. We also have an indication of how long it's taken the student to complete the screener. And in this case, it took a little longer than Joe's initial screening of 4 minutes and 48 seconds, 7:52. And that's largely because he answered some of the questions affirmatively. And on that basis, we branched to further questions to gather additional detail that's helpful and valuable to a clinician. So I don't want to take too much time, but I'm going to quickly jump over to the report. This is the most recent report for Joe's second screening that he took. Again, we have the top line recommendation for follow-up within 3 days. That's on the basis of a lifetime positive result and a recent negative result. So lifetime positive is somewhat concerning, but it could be something as simple as 5 years ago, I broke up with my girlfriend and I was feeling suicidal, which isn't concerning at the moment, but it's still something we want to know about and talk about because there's some risk associated with that. We also have the key item response summary. So these are the items that really drive those results. The first section deals with thinking or ideation, and the second deals with behaviors. You can see that the reason we have a lifetime positive result for Joe is that he answered yes, that he had intention of acting on thoughts of killing himself at some point in his life, and indeed had a plan and intended to carry it out at some point in his life. So that's something a clinician would want to ask further questions about, make sure that Joe was safe, make sure he didn't have access to lethal means, and just make sure that he wasn't going to do anything to harm himself. As I mentioned earlier, we have the depression and anxiety scores down here. We're now in the moderate range. If we get above that cut point of 15 on either of these scales, we want to start thinking about we want to do additional follow-up with students who are probably experiencing some lack or loss of functioning because of depression and anxiety attacks. And that's something we really want to target. If we can get kids functioning well, they tend to feel better. Clinicians really can do a good job intervening in that way to make that happen. And again, just the final thing I'll say here is we have all of the full response set of questions and answers that Joe has given. So, we can see, for example, the questions Joe answered yes to in ideation. At any time, have you ever started to actually worked out the specific details of how to kill yourself? You said yes. And did you actually intend to carry out the details of your plan? Yes. How did you intend to kill yourself? With a gun? How often did the thoughts occur, daily or almost daily? How long did they last? Between 1 and 4 hours. So really a wealth of information that we've gathered here in a short period of time that a clinician can act on to establish an appropriate care plan and an appropriate safety plan for the student, which is really what this assessment and follow-up process is all about. So I don't want to dwell too much more on the assessment. Why don't we go on to the slides? I'll stop my screen share, unless there are questions anybody has. Let me first, of course, open it to any questions.
So before we get to questions, the one thing that I do want to point out to the committee and just reemphasize, because we talked about it last month, these results that they used me as the demo, but these results are not in the hands of our staff. And I just want to reemphasize that this is nothing that a teacher or a principal would have to make sense of. This would be something that our student services staff, psych, social workers, counselors would help in the facilitation of. But these records would be, they would go to the parents, they would go right to the treatment staff that would be on site. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I just want to, if you have any questions as to who's going to see this, and this looks like some complicated stuff, please know that this is not in the hands of teaching staff. This is in the hands of professionals. We did have one question, though. We'll hold on the question, and then we'll get into the presentation now.
Okay, one more thing I would mention, if it's okay. I'm sorry, I neglected to mention this, just very quickly. We've seen the staff report that the clinicians use to follow up with students on the day of a screening or within 3 days of a screening in the event of moderate risk. There is also a student-parent report that can be shared with the student and the parent that provides similar information to what the staff and therapist report, but also provides some context about how to interpret these results, what they mean, and really is intended to make the student and the parent a partner in the student's care and follow up and progress. So I just wanted to not miss that important point. This is something that I think in some cases in Montana we share with parents, not in others. It's optional, but it's certainly available should you decide that that's something you'd be interested in doing if we proceed with this. So that was it for my part, and we can turn it over in terms of the presentation itself.
I just wanted to add one more thing about the student and parent reports. Some schools have opted to share them with the students. The students are always really interested in seeing their results. And when we have shared with the students, because the school decided that's what they wanted to do, that's gone over very, very well. Like, kids really want to know if they're doing okay, and if they're not doing okay, what does that mean?
Super.
Okay, we are ready to head into the presentation now. If you want to, can you pull up the slide deck, or would you like me to present?
Were you going to project the slide?
I will project the slides right now. How do we get them off the main screen? Go to stop screen share. You'd think we'd have had some of this mastered after COVID, but we've also got, at least me, have gotten out of practice with some of this. Okay, we have the presentation up now. So Revere, Janet, and John, if you want to take it from here, I'll progress the slides. Are you still able to hear us? You have your mic on. This is the boardroom.
I think you can hear us now. Can you hear us, Joe?
Yeah, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm going to turn my mic off as you go through the slides, and I'll just follow along here.
Okay. From our side?
We have them up on our cameras right now, so you don't need to.
Okay. Or would you like us to?
I have them up on our screen, and I'll advance them as you speak through them.
Janet, I
Is it
can't.
possible for us to see them? I'm sorry, I can't see the presentation.
1 second, we'll get that up to you. If you'd like to do that, that might be easier.
Okay, here we go. Can you all see this now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And Janet, I can advance if you'd like me to, just as you speak.
Sure, I just wanted to double check. This is what we had the last time. Is this what we're looking for? Or are we just looking for description of the pilot project for this meeting?
The description of the pilot project right at the end there.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think this is the right one, Revere. Sorry, Joe.
I think this is it.
This is it. We added on to the end.
Exactly. Yes, indeed.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so we just want to walk you through some of the steps. And we were thinking about a small pilot working with one of the alternative high schools, which we were informed has about 100 students. And so we've worked with a number of alternative high schools before. They tend to be a really good place to start. And so what we would do is first talk with the staff, the school staff that would be involved. It's really important to get everyone on board and knowing what they're going to do initially. And then we would talk about, so we would make some decisions about which grades at the alternative high school we would want to start with. We would want to figure out if we wanted to add an additional assessment, which Revere showed you the standard 3, which are depression, anxiety, and suicide risk. But we do have a screener for substance misuse. And for some schools decide that's what they want to do. So we would make that sort of decision, figure out who's going to be the point person at the school. So this will be the person who is able to get the results as students complete the screener, and then would connect students to the therapists that are on site. We want to make sure that the school has decided what type of parental consent form they want to do. And when we were speaking with Joe, we thought an opt-in parental consent process might be the way to start. We've had a few schools in Montana that start that way, and just because they think that's going to go best with their community and their parents and their student populations. You guys know best. So we thought we would start with opt-in. One thing to know about opt-in is you'll get about 25 to 40% student participation versus 70 to 100% participation when you use opt-out. But again, totally up to the school and the district how they want to do that. Then we would, once we know who the people at the school who are going to be participating are, we know what kind of parental consent, then we start thinking about when are we going to implement this. So that's called a screening schedule. So we need to arrange to make sure that we have sufficient number of therapists who are available on the desired screening days. Because we would be piloting in an alternative school, they tend to have higher rates of suicidality than students who are not attending an alternative school. So we would want to make sure we have sufficient staff to support more than the average number of students who might be having suicide. And then we want to coordinate with local providers. And this would be something that RBHI would assist the school district with or do and then provide the school district with information over the summer. We'd be identifying people in the community that offer different types of services and resources to students so that by the time we get to a screening day, we know where to send students. And it's our understanding that one of the resources we could use is the Care Solace organization that could be assisting families with kind of ongoing care needs. Also, it sounds like there might be school-based social workers who also might be able to facilitate that type of to make sure students are getting to the care they need. John has been speaking with Roger Behavioral Health, and it sounds like they would be very interested in participating if the school desires that. They could actually do the same day follow-up care for kids who identify with high risk of suicide. And so those are kind of where we're at as far as the planning. And so then we just want to talk about is the alternative high school the place that the district thinks is the best place to start. We are totally open to whatever your recommendation is. We will say, like, just getting it, there's a lot you can do with alternative schools that's fairly straightforward because those are kids that already need some extra support, and so it tends to be well received. But if you guys say you want to start somewhere else, we're more than happy to do that. And then are there any more slides, Revere?
No, that completes the slide deck. So,
and I think Joe shared a kind of more detailed step-by-step process, which I'm happy to email again. Just kind of the 3 different screening phases. So we have the preparation phase before we screen. We have what happens on a screening day, and then after kids have screened, the different steps that happen. And I'm happy to talk about any of those steps in greater detail if desired.
So we had started some conversations just internally as to what the planning would need to look like. Spoke with Sue Poppy before we talked tonight, obviously, and she was interested if we were to be able to do a pilot. East would be a nice pilot location for us to start at. It would allow us to troubleshoot some of the things. You see in there, we talked about doing an opt-in to start, where families would have to elect to participate, whereas the other option, opt-out, is you have to tell us you don't want your child. Janet, if you could talk a little bit about the experience that you had in Montana with that, where communities started opt-in and the transition to opt-out.
Sure. So the first school district that we ever piloted the program in, I can actually disclose it's Livingston, which is my hometown. And they decided, so it's a very, they're very cautious with new programs, I would say. And so they decided that because we were working on something related to mental health, that it would be best received by their stakeholders, so parents and students, if they used an opt-in process. We saw, depending on the grade, we saw 25 to 40% participation at a middle and high school. And then after the first year, the school district decided to change to opt out. And they didn't hear any resistance from parents. So by the time it had been done once, the parents were pretty much on board, seeing that this wasn't labeling kids in a particular way or causing any, undue distress to students. And so that's gone very, very well. We haven't heard, they'll get some calls from parents just looking for more information. But I think they've had, I don't know that they've had any parents that have opted their children out of that school. We have had the occasional school district have some parents opt their students out, and it just kind of depends on location. But certainly, if this is something that you think will be better received, starting with opt-in and starting slowly is a good way to go. But if you want to make sure that as many students as possible receive the intervention, opt-out is the way to go. But again, up to you, your communities.
So, committee, I guess, do you have any questions for us as we, either stop the planning or continue to move forward into the next steps?
Yeah, I just got a few questions. I'm just curious if the students agree to getting help as a condition of taking the assessment. I mean, you would think they would, but I'm just curious if that's a condition of the assessment, is that they're going to get.
So we would have help available if they elected it, and I'd have to ask Janet, based off of her experiences in Montana, where they've been doing this now for a while. Have you ever had a child or a family reject services after a moderate to high risk result in the survey?
So for moderate suicidality, they check in with the kids within 3 days, and I haven't heard of anyone. It's just like they just want to make sure that there isn't something new going on that would put that child at higher risk of dying by suicide. And then for high risk, at least in Montana, the school, once it knows about a possible self-harm, they're required by their suicide safety plans to check in with that child. So once the child has taken the screener, they will talk to a therapist. And we have not had any kids that were resistant to that. All I can think of is there have been 2 or 3 kids out of 10,000 this year who didn't want to complete the screener. So they had been having a rough day, just decided they didn't want to. Whoever was proctoring the screener talked with them. The students were fine. But to my knowledge, those are the only times that happened. Here. You're muted.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry, I was muted by the host. Involuntarily muted. I just wanted to say that one of the real benefits, which I think we mentioned last time, but I want to really emphasize, of doing the electronic direct student report approach, which an electronic screener like the school screener and the ECSS, or the suicide risk assessment, offers, is that we elicit greater candor from students when we ask them about stigmatized topics. So anytime you ask somebody about something like alcohol or substance abuse, John is an internist, he can tell you when he asks people about alcohol use here in Wisconsin, he takes the number and doubles it. people are more honest with a computer than they are with a person who they think might be judging them. And really the upshot of that is that at every screening we do, we find a kid who is not on the school's or even the parents' radar as being at risk of suicide or experiencing serious behavioral health issues. So I think that it's possible that a student would refuse care, but many more students are coming forth and seeking help and seeking care via this screening process than are refusing care after taking the screening.
Yeah, and I can actually just add to that, sorry to belabor this. So we've seen, and this is anecdotal, but our therapists mentioned that what they hear most is that kids are really glad they were asked because they didn't know how to talk about it or who to even tell. So we hear that pretty frequently. And granted, that's anecdotal. I don't have hard data on that. But the other thing we also saw is one of the school districts we work with, which was one of the bigger ones, they used the link and the kids weren't supposed to be able to access the link after the school completed screening. But some of the students stored it on their phone and then went back and re-screened, and the school set up, additional care after hours because kids actually wanted access to care, and that was the way that they were able to ask for help. So we have put in safeguards so that can't happen. That was news to us that students would even do that, but they can't anymore. We can shut the link down very quickly. But that indicates that students, as a whole, are looking to get some help, and this gives them one mechanism for doing that.
So I think you said if a student scores moderately on either suicide or anxiety, they're getting follow-up within 3 days. If it's high, are they getting follow-up that day, the next day, or how soon are they talking to a therapist?
Within hours. So the way that we schedule screening is it happens within the first 3 hours of school so that we have sufficient time to make sure we get to every child that has said they've had recent suicidality the same day they were screened. We don't let any of them go home without talking with a therapist.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yep. And I can say, so out of 10,000 screens, there have been 3 students who didn't go through a thorough evaluation with a therapist on the same day. And that was based on the schools deciding that child was safe to go home. And then they did follow up the next day. So we're at 99.6% same day care. So it's feasible to do it. And it just, we don't want those kids going home if they might be at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So just maybe a little bit more clarification on the part where a student is identified as being of risk. It's going to go to the school therapist, psychologist that day, and then then it's going to get passed off to another service like a Care Solace, or will they stay engaged somewhere? I'm just kind of wondering how.
So we would have a school coordinator for this, which would be one of our student services staff. But we would have on-site providers. So we'd have on-site therapists who would see the high-risk kids that day. And then at that point, it could be that it's with the child, the parent, and the therapist as to what the next steps are. And then the school is really acting as the vehicle to do this, but not acting as the therapy provider. Outside of what might be like a path, which we talked about last month, where we have on-site therapists, but this would then go into the realm of the parent, the child, and the providers.
So we'll have additional resources on the days we're doing screening.
Correct. We would not do screening if we did not have adequate staff on hand. The nice thing about what they've done out in Montana is they've got some good baseline data for us to kind of plan around. You know, if 10% of the kids who are screened that day might fall into the high risk, we would essentially know how many, based off of the sample tested, how many we would need to have providers for. If you have 100 students, 10 of them are going to come back positive, we would want to have enough therapists on hand to handle approximately 10 students. So that would be all part of the planning, and it would be in place before we went forward and did this at a school.
So say we're doing 100 students, how many screenings roughly, how does that break down? How quickly are we going to know how those students, what kind of care, if any, they would need? I mean, are we doing 10 a day or over what span of time? Do you have any idea from past?
I'd have to defer to Janet, just in the, in how it would go when we did talk about this. In a pilot, we would try to do 100 students in the day.
Oh, okay.
Because of how you could roll this out with a schedule. But when you saw my results up there, one of them was like 4.5 minutes and the other one was just shy of 8 or something like that. We could have a staff member go classroom by classroom and get 10 to 15 kids per class relatively quickly. But Janet can talk a little bit more about how they've done things out in Montana.
Yeah, so sometimes it's easiest for a school district to start smaller, so screen, say 50 kids in a day. You have a really good idea of how many kids then on subsequent screening that are likely to come up positive who will need that same day care. But we have had schools that start with over 200 screens in a single day. So we have pretty good, we have a really good idea of how many kids are likely to screen positive. So what it comes down to is how many providers are available for that same day care. And then we decide how many kids to screen that first time. But sometimes, everyone's a little, just a little unsure the first time. And so sometimes doing a smaller cohort of kids for the first screening just gives everyone some confidence that, and they've got a little extra time. So it's based on what the school tells us would be easiest for them. But we can screen as many kids as we have providers for. So, I mean, it literally could be hundreds in a day if we have sufficient providers.
So I know we're not taking a formal vote, but is there interest out of the committee in us coming back with what would be the actual pilot design in May? And then put that on as an approval item for something that we would kick off in what is next year, 3-4 school year? Okay.
Would that include some type of cost analysis or how?
We would take a look at the costing. That's coming up. Mark Leonard, who will be presenting here in a few minutes, he's currently working on the mental health grant that we work with the DPI on. We do have some grant monies available to help get this up and running. And then we certainly can figure out a little bit based off of our size, first what a pilot would cost, and then after that, what we would be looking at from a district-wide grades 6 through 12 if we decided to implement it at that level. All right, thank you. Janet, John Revere, thank you very much. And we'll exchange some emails here in the week ahead and try to get another meeting on the calendar. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you all. Yep, take care. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
So I do apologize for some of the technical, Michelle, you're broadcasting, some of the technical issues that we have as we try to do a live presentation and bring people in remotely. But, as we go forward, we can talk more about what that next presentation needs to look like so that any questions by the committee or additional board members, should they want to come, could ask.
Good evening. So just a brief
summary of what the work group has been doing for the last month. We previously met January, February, March, and we are not meeting in April this month because, well, you'll see in just a moment, but the goal for the next 30 days is for the schools to actually implement what we have been talking about up to this point. They have been working on their behavioral plans, and then once they have some data, we're going to come back in May and talk about what that data looks like and how things are going. So, in the February meeting, we reviewed WISE-local data, district trends, local trends as well, reviewed their behavior plan and their 100-day sale plan by levels, elementary, secondary. We shared those plans out with some other teams in an effort to see if there were any trends or any commonalities and to do some celebrating as to how far they had come. In March, again, trends, both local and district-wide. We'll talk about those in just a moment. And then we talked about the 4 C's of climate, communication, curriculum, and culture. That's from the Behavioral Solutions text, which is what we're using to guide our work on this committee. And then each school created and submitted a precise problem statement for their school, so what it is that they are working on, and determined which 2 standards, one academic and one social behavior, to focus on school-wide. And so this month and next into May, they're going to be implementing that and collecting data behind that. May, we will meet to share out implementation progress, how the Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions are being implemented in each school, what the student data points look like after 8 weeks of implementation, and the text talks about academies that are utilized to help students help mitigate behaviors that schools are seeing. So like they may have a no-touch academy at the elementary level and how those get utilized. We'll also discuss how the plans will more effectively connect to their overall sale planning, which is our year-to-year school improvement planning. We're already talking about that at sort of the leadership level. We'll be talking more specifically about that at the school level as we move forward. One thing that's happening next week is our new deputy superintendent, who's here today, Mrs. Gennerman, and I, along with another staff member, will be attending the RTI at Work Institute in Green Bay. And this is, it's by the same group that wrote the book that we're utilizing, and it's how to connect the academic and the behavioral into one intervention plan. So we're going to be looking at that and listening to the experts in that field as to how we build out that system-wide intervention system for the district, and targeting those interventions to meet school needs. And then we'll take that back to the site leaders at the May committee meeting and talk about that at that time. Okay. Any questions about that so far before I go into our more recent WISE data?
Mr. Zenobia?
I did have a question. Can you scroll back just a
Sure.
little bit?
Yep.
My computer's not working. There, yeah. So in creating the school-wide problem statements, that will be completed at the end of the year, or?
This was done at the last meeting.
Okay.
So it's a work in progress, but it's something that they in their teams and then took back to the schools. So it talks about academic or social behaviors that they want to utilize, the actions that they utilize to solve the problem, the timeline, and the person responsible for each. And so they created these precise problems. This is just the template, of course, but each school would have turned that in.
Okay.
So
Is that part of a report that would be helpful for us to see, or to get a sense of, maybe uniformly what's going on and what some of the solutions?
I mean, at this point, it's very much a draft.
Okay.
And so you have, 3 people from each school who are working as representatives of their school, but then they're taking that back and saying,
does this capture what we want to work on? And how can we implement this moving forward? Once it becomes, or once it is more fully integrated into the sale process, I don't know how far you dig down into the sale plans, but that could certainly be something that would be, I think, much more clear and concise, probably.
Yeah, and the reason I ask really is just to see, with all the work that's gone into this, kind of what at each school level or what's been found out about the process, about what's going on, and more to see a progression of things are changing, and this is why, I guess, for me. So
Well, and that's in the data that I'm going to talk about in just a bit,
Okay.
unless there are other questions.
Any other questions? All right, let's see the data.
Okay. So this is WISE Dash data. Sorry, I need my glasses. And I don't have them. But just to kind of show you, to kind of give you the overview. So when you look at the WISE Dash data, and I'm going to blow this up in just a second here, but this is year over year, September 1st to April 18th, number of incidents. At first blush, this might look concerning, but there are things about this that I actually think are really positive. So when you look at this year, which at this point we have 13,678 incidents, referrals, as I like to call them. Last year at this time we had 9,530. Okay, that may sound concerning, but once you start to drill down into the data a little bit, what you see is what is being focused on. And in this particular case, the top three things that are being focused on right now and moving forward are, and sorry, there's a little bit of a lag when I scroll this up, inappropriate language and expression. Okay, so that's one. Inappropriate language, expression, or interaction. So that has jumped. Another one is repeated refusal to follow directions. That's sort of a catch-all for that second or third time that the teacher has had that conversation with the student about the same behavior. That could be something as simple as not sitting in your assigned seat. And then the other one that was actually very frequently utilized right now is inappropriate location. So what I would call a cut class or skipping class. So these are the low-hanging fruit that we've kind of talked about this year of things that we want to see our staff focusing on, because it's those small interactions and the fact that they are being documented that can help head off the larger interactions. And just to kind of show you some of the more positive things, you're like, okay, well, all those things are up. Well, what's down? Well, one of the things that is down actually is bullying. Bullying's down more than 50%. The other one that's down is harassment, also down significantly. So, those are some of the higher level need behaviors that we like to see go down. I attribute this to an increased focus on documentation. It was one of the first things that we talked about at the start of this year is documenting this data so that we can drill down into it and really take a close look at it. And it's also the focus of our staff in saying, these are the expectations that we want to hold our students to, and we'll communicate that out to parents to make sure that they're aware. So those are the overall goals. Now, in the big picture, one of the things that looks good, and I'm sorry this is hard to see, I'm going to try and blow that up. There we go. So this is suspension usage. So if you look at 21-22, this is in-school suspension. We had 619 at this time last year versus 583. Out-of-school suspension last year we had 1,054. This year we have 927. So not a massive shift, but a shift nonetheless, where those small targeted interventions in the buildings are leading to better outcomes in terms of what we would consider to be one of the bigger levers that we pull for discipline when we have to send a student home. So that's good news. The other one that was way up, which made me laugh, was improper display of affection. That was up. So, but it's springtime,
Yeah,
so that could be why. We just had prom, some of the schools. So, Any questions on any of that?
Any questions? So do we communicate with the building administrator of what we want them to what we want the teachers to concentrate on? You said those are up because we're targeting those?
Well, twice a year, we do a discipline presentation, we call it discipline norming, where we meet with all the administrators for 2 hours and talk about, and the meetings are different in the fall and the spring.
Okay.
Like, here are the fall behaviors and the expectations that we want to look at, and here are the reminders of things that we see in spring. And Wise Dash gives us an opportunity to see some of those things in graph form where we can kind of expect what's coming up. Another one that's been up this year, and again, I think this is a good thing, it's a focus on academic rigor, is the one for plagiarism is way up. It's almost up by 100%. But to me, that's teachers being cognizant of it and working through that with students. Now, I certainly wouldn't expect that's going to end with a suspension or anything like that, but it's more teaching kids that, one of the key tenets of being a high school student or a student is doing your own work. So that's another one.
We have given schools some autonomy as to what they need to focus on.
Okay.
Because, each school is
Each school is
different.
different,
Each
that's
school
right.
has been on this journey in different places. One of the things that we've observed over time is when the principal has been in their school for a long period of time, obviously there's a higher level of implementation. So there are some schools that when we talk about having an academic or social behavioral goal, they've been focusing on that for a very long time.
Right.
And so right now they're at like minor tweaks, and some of their work is institutionalized. In other places, it's getting going, as school communities have either come together or administration has turned over.
Okay. Ready. And then bullying is down quite a bit, substantially percentage-wise. A lot of people would say that's untrue, but we always concentrate on bullying, right?
Yes.
That is something that
Yep.
is a non-negotiable in our schools. We concentrate on that.
Yep, and it starts with, what are those person-to-person interactions? And how can we do, and you see this at the elementary schools regularly, where it's like, how do we build and create positive relationships? And not just teacher to student, but student to student.
Right.
And how does, and it's being very deliberate about talking with students about, you may have had your feelings hurt. Imagine how that feels to someone else when you don't treat them in an appropriate way. So those are ongoing tier 1 interventions that you'll see in all of our schools.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Just a clarification. So you indicated some of the areas that they're focusing more on this year, and then show that, the suspensions either in school or out of school are down. Are teachers getting additional training on how to handle those items that they're looking for more? Or is that something they were, already pretty well known? Because you had mentioned something about, you think the small or the short interactions of dealing with those issues is what's leading to less suspension. So if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I do think, excuse me, there is ongoing interaction or ongoing teaching across the board of, for the teachers, what are the tools in their toolbox? That's what I talk about all the time with administrative teams, is how do we give teachers the tools to be successful in their classrooms? And how do they handle those classroom interventions first and foremost before it becomes the referral? And I think that's why you see, like, the repeated refusal is the teacher has said, I have addressed this several times. Now it needs to go to the assistant principal, dean of students, however you want to put it. But yes, we talk, I think, very specifically, and Dr. Cook mentions this, when you have the same principal every year over year, and they're talking about the same types of tools, it becomes very institutionalized and very regular. It's when you have that turnover or when you have new staff that you have to reset those expectations and have those conversations about those tools.
Anything else? Nope. Excellent.
Thank you.
A lot of work.
Yep,
Thank you very much.
appreciate it. Thank you, sir. All right, I'm all set.
Alrighty. That concludes our discussion information items for this evening. Next up is recommendation for future meetings. Does anybody have any recommendations for upcoming meetings? Okay, if you do, email them to myself and Dr. Cook, and we will get it on the agenda. And that concludes our meeting for this evening. Thank you all for taking the time. Meeting adjourned.